Huckleberry Finn begins his adventure in his hometown of St. Petersburg. Here, he spends his days being civilized by the widow and Miss Watson, as well as playing with Tom Sawyer and his friends, imagining they are robbers and such. One day, in search of Huck's money, Huck's pap comes to kidnap him and takes him to his cabin in the woods. Huck is content with this, but gets tired of the beatings, so one day he fakes his murder by slaughtering a wild pig, spreading blood everywhere, stealing all of his pap's supplies, and escaping in a canoe. Huck paddles down the Mississippi River to Jackson Island to live out the rest of his life. After a few days, though, Huck becomes lonely, but is excited to find Miss Watson's slave Jim on the island with him. Huck learns that Jim has run away, but since they're both hiding, they decide to team up. Huck and Jim pack all their supplies onto a raft that they find, and sneak away one night after Huck learns that men are searching for him. As they go down river together, they come across the wreck of a steamboat, the Sir Walter Scott. They go aboard and discover that thieves are looting the boat. When they discover that their raft has been washed away also, they find and take the thieves' boat with their loot. Feeling guilty, Huck convinces another steamboat to go back for the stranded thieves, but when the steamboat finally arrives, it's too late and the thieves have drowned.
Continuing downriver, Jim tells Huck of his plan to go up the Ohio River at Cairo to the Free States and get a job to buy his family out of slavery. While Huck is conflicted about whether or not to turn in Jim for his immoral plan, he doesn't get the chance to because as they approach the town of Cairo, they get separated in a fog and are unable to find each other until they are well past the town. When Huck comes across Jim asleep on the raft, he decides to play a trick on Jim by telling him that he was never lost and that he was only dreaming. When Jim sees that Huck is lying, he is hurt and tells Huck that he didn't think being made a fool of was funny. Huck is hard-pressed to apologize to Jim, but he finally does. A ways after passing Cairo, the raft is struck by a steamboat, forcing Huck and Jim to land in Kentucky. When Huck goes in search of help, he comes across the Grangerfords, who are at first wary of him due to their feud with the Shepherdson family. Huck convinces them that he isn't trouble and needs their help. They take him in, clothe him, and treat him as part of the family. As Huck lives with them, he sees how tight-knit and apparently civilized they are. Their hypocrisy becomes apparent as they carry weapons to the church sermon about brotherhood. Huck continues to live with family until he discovers Jim has been hiding away in the forest and has also recovered a large portion of the raft. As Huck makes preparations to leave, he hears of a shootout that is going to occur between the feuding families. He decides to go, but as the firefight plays out, he sees his friend, Buck Grangerford, shot and killed. After dragging out the corpses of his friends who had died, Jim appears with the raft, and the two escape downriver.
As the two continue downriver, Huck decides to venture out one day and comes across two men being chased. He takes them to the raft where they introduce themselves as the King and the Duke. They claim to require service fitting of royalty from their hosts, who oblige them. Jim is amazed and continues to believe their story for a time, while Huck eventually sees through their lies, but continues to indulge them. The group continues to travel together for some time, and along the way the two con artists do different plays and cons to make money, including pretending to be a pirate turned missionary and performing a mishmash of Shakespearean plays. The most profitable act was in a one-horse Arkansas town where the Duke and King put on a play dubbed the Royal Nonsuch. It consisted of only a few minutes of the King dancing around naked on stage. The crowd became enraged but decided to advertise it to the rest of the town so everybody else wasted their money, like they did. The story plays out the same way on the second night as well. On the third night, the crowd comes prepared with spoiled fruit and vegetables to throw at the King. However, this time the group escapes through the back door and makes off with the profits from their venture. The King and the Duke's next con has, by far, the most potential for profit, but is also the most ill-willed and immoral. A man in a nearby town, Peter Wilkes, has died and detailed giving money and property to his two English brothers in his will. The King and the Duke decide to impersonate the brothers and make off with the gains. The plan goes smoothly until Huck develops a crush on the grieving Mary Jane and begins to feel guilty about stealing from her family. He attempts to take and hide the inheritance money so as to expose the King and the Duke for frauds, but is forced to hide the money bag in Peter Wilkes' coffin when Mary Jane comes down to pray. When the real brothers of the Wilkes show up, the trial ensues, and Huck is only saved by the king's persistence in not giving up his character. When the mob goes to dig up Peter Wilkes' grave to find who's telling the truth, they discover the $6,000 of gold in the grave, providing enough commotion for Huck to escape, followed closely by the king and the duke.
As the group continues downriver, they attempt con after con, but fail to make much of any money. In frustration, they land the raft and head to a bar for some R&R. As the two men get into a fight there, Huck heads for the raft to escape with Jim. When Huck arrives, he's astonished to learn that the Duke had sold Jim while he wasn't around. Huck resolves to do the wrong thing and break Jim out. Huck discovers that Jim has been sold to Silas Phelps and heads to his farm as soon as he can. When he arrives, Silas's wife approaches him and asks if he is her nephew Tom, who she is expecting. Huck learns that Silas is away and continues to plan a way to set Jim free. When Silas arrives back from his trip, Huck realizes that he is impersonating none other than his friend Tom Sawyer, and that these two are Tom's aunt and uncle. Huck leaves to intercept his luggage while he is actually leaving to find the real Tom Sawyer. When Huck greets Tom and explains the situation, it appears as if Tom has something to say, but forgets about it at the thought of adventure. The two return together, and Huck introduces Tom as Sid Sawyer, Tom's real half-brother. They eventually find out that Jim is being stored in an old shed, poorly guarded and easy to break out of. Tom is disappointed in this discovery, and, to make it more exciting, decides to complicate the plan in order to do it like in the books. They chip their way through the dirt floor with knives, plan a way to cut Jim's foot off to remove the chain, and concoct many other pointless preparations for Jim before escaping. However, Tom's foolishness almost ends in disaster when they are finally carrying out their escape. Because they sent letters to Silas's that a band of robbers are coming to take Jim, an armed crowd comes to defend the Phelps property. Tom is even shot when hopping over the fence to escape. However, Tom is excited about this because he finally has the adventure he wanted, and tells Huck and Jim to leave and run without him. At Jim's strong insistence, Huck goes off to find a doctor for Tom while Jim stays back to care for him. When Huck returns, he finds the Phelps worried sick about Tom, who is missing to their knowledge. Huck feels guilty and resolves never to make them worry so badly again.
Finally, Huck finds a doctor to treat Tom and sends him off to the hiding place. When the doctor returns with Tom and Jim, the townsfolk talk of lynching Jim. Tom reveals that Miss Watson had actually died and that Jim was free the entire time. At this news, Jim tells Huck that his pet died as well. To pay for his adventure, Tom gives Jim $600, and Huck heads west with Tom to the territory to find another adventure.
I'll take my seat right way back. Oh, yeah, I watch this train go down the track.